Welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be discussing an update that Adobe has announced. It's not really a new update at this point, but I did want to highlight it as there's an important day that is very fast approaching. And so what we're going to be discussing is the changes to specifically event subscription versioning in Fusion. So if you're in Fusion, you may have noticed there's been a new version of the modules of V2, and that includes the event subscriptions or the watch events. And so there is a really important date that everyone needs to be aware of. Hopefully, this isn't new news to you, but in case it is, I'm going to break it down and explain what this means. But then also in this video, going to walk through basically a quick example of how to update the module, specifically the a watch event. But also updating the other modules are pretty straightforward, as the watch events are a little bit trickier. Then also showing a kind of hack or trick that you may not be aware of for updating those modules. So definitely stay till the end so you can see that. But anyways, jumping into kind of what's going on here. So if I scroll down, the main day I want to highlight is January 15th of 2026 of next year. If you're watching this still at the end of 2025. So what does that mean? That means that if you have event subscriptions that are still on the V1 by or on January 15th, Adobe will basically automatically update that to your V2 subscription. Why is that concerning? Because when they're doing a mass update like that, one, that can break things for you, and two, you want to make sure that you're, in control of changes that are happening to your scenarios. Um, Not meaning, anything bad or wrong on the Adobe side, just by the nature of, your automations, you want to be able to test it properly, make those changes, do some, error handling, do some testing, make sure everything is running properly. Because the last thing you want is suddenly all you have multiple scenarios, and they all get updated, and then suddenly all of these, processes are breaking because multiple scenarios are have stopped working for whatever reason. So definitely want to avoid that. I'll link to this article. It gives a good breakdown of what are the changes between version one and version two. Nothing too crazy. Um, and again, I'm not going to go into the details of every little change. I'll leave the link if you want to dive more into it in detail. But just again, be aware that you should, my recommendation, before January 15th, go in, make these changes if you haven't already. That way you have time to test it properly and just make sure it's a smooth transition. So now jumping into Fusion here, you probably would have seen by now these little green kind of circles with these arrows that are indicating, hey, you need to update this module. So this is a really simple scenario that I did just as a demo to show you one what it would look like saying, hey, visually these ones you can see right off the bat are a V1. And you also notice in Fusion, you also see that there's a V1 module. And if I were to go into Workfront, these are basically V1 is considered legacy. And if I do this doesn't say legacy. It now is the V2. Has basically all the same modules, just the updated versions. Few small differences, some of them more impactful than others. But this video, I'm not going to go through, each module. Really want to focus on this watch event. And so, just to real quick give some context of what's going on. Again, like I said, very simple scenario here. Basically, it's looking for a task to be marked complete. When that task is completed, it goes in and that triggers it, and it updates the project status to current. Basically, before this, it would typically be in planning. And then it also updates the description. And so to show you what it looks like in the project, this is the task, this internal team meeting. And then I have this little custom form with this field demo notes that is going to be, this field is what is going to be pushed to the project as the description. And so I really wanted to highlight in this video a custom field, because one of the tricks I'm going to be showing you is specifically related to custom fields, and that's where you can run into some more issues, or it can be a bit more time consuming. It can be a bit trickier to update all your modules when you're dealing with custom forms. And so let's go in and let's update this. So what you're going to want to do is if you click on this, you'll notice it says, okay, there's a new version available. Consider replacing this module with a new version. Again, consider replacing it. I would recommend doing it before January 15th. So let's just choose new. So that's automatically going to go to as V2, and then we're going to do a watch event. So we're basically just going to replace one watch event V1 for a watch event V2. So if I click into here, it will show you the filters. So we have record type task, state new state, then we have our filters. The template task ID is equal to this, which I'm just going to copy now. Status is equal to complete, and also status is changed. We're going to exclude connections, user updates excluded, and then origin, we're going to do an updated record only. Okay. So what a lot of times I'll do is you can have, especially have two monitors, have one monitor up with this here that you can look at, and then you have this up with the new one that you're creating so you can reference it. But this is a pretty straightforward one. So you notice since this is a V2, if I go in here, there's no current option. So let's just add a new one and we'll call this YouTube demo V2. So we're gonna make sure we have our Fusion connection. Record type, this was task. Then we're doing new state. Filters, we're filtering it based off that template task ID is equal to what I copied. We want the status um, to be equal to complete. And then I'm also going to say status is changed. Um, so basically meaning I only want this to trigger when the status is changed to complete. You could um, technically eliminate one of these here. You could say, just for example, leave changed and say when the status is changed on this task based on the template task ID, then trigger. Um, the disadvantage there is if it's changed, any change, right? If it's changed from new to in progress, it would trigger, or or to complete, or even from complete to a different status. It would trigger each time. Obviously, you could handle that easily by adding a filter right after that module, based on to say like, only pass if the status is complete. And so if this is a trigger for maybe you're saying, if it's changes to in progress, I want it to do this. If it changes to complete, I want it to do this. Add a router, add those filters, that'd be perfect. Um, the disadvantage is then kind of the same there. Well, the advantage and disadvantage, depending on what you're trying to do, is it will trigger, whenever it's changed. So in this specific case, I only want it to trigger when it's changed to complete, not to any other status. That's why I want it to be status equals complete, and I'm also doing the status changed. Because the other thing is I don't want this to trigger if the status is complete and then something happens to that task, um, and it meets this criterion, it triggers, right? I only want it to trigger when you're changing the status to complete. So hopefully that made sense. And then with that record origin, we're just gonna do an updated record, right? Because again, the whole concept is we're changing it from either new or in progress to complete. So just a quick double check that new state, template task ID. Yeah, that looks good. So let's save that. You'll notice for these V2s, this looks a little bit different. Um, it's basically bringing in a little bit like new information with the subscription ID. You'll see the filters down here. Um, if, for example, this is an update. If I did a new, um, this would say new data instead of update, and then if you did both, you'd actually have two of these little boxes. But anyway, so that's the updated module. So now let's update the rest of the scenario. So we have that module, so I'm just going to bring this down here. Um, I'm going to unlink this, and let's just bring this down here, for example. Okay, so now we have the updated. Let's rename it. We'll just call it the same thing, task complete. And then there's a few things you want to do. Always look at your filters. That's going to be the first thing that will trick you up. If you notice you try to save, you might get this error saying reference module is not accessible. Um, you'll notice this little yellow kind of warning icon saying, hey, this is referencing something like a module that's not like it doesn't exist in the sense of what's happening here because it's still referencing data from this module. But you won't get any sort of notification on your filters. So make sure whenever you make an update like this, go through all your filters and check that they have been updated. So this needs to be updated to new state status from now this new module, which would be right here. So now you notice it's referencing that little pulsing graphic or animation. And so now let's update this. So again, we're going to update the project ID to the new project ID, which is going to be here. And then there's another field we need to update, which is this demo notes. But this is the little hack or trick I wanted to show you. So this is hopefully something new and interesting for you. So you'll notice that this custom field isn't available to select. Um, and you'll notice whenever you create a new event subscription like that, any custom field data won't come across. So you have a couple options, right? You could run this, right? Run it, and then that'll bring in all the data, assuming there is data on that task, right? Um, and then you would have all the data and you can map it accordingly. You'd be able to just do the normal mapping where you know, come in here just like you did this, you'd be able to select it because now it would show up. Depending on, you know, what you're doing, depending on the process you're working on, um, that could be problematic to try to run it. You know, especially if you have a lot of scenarios happening and you want to make sure you don't accidentally trigger some other process, right? Where you're saying, okay, well, I'm moving this. I don't want to accidentally trigger some other scenario. Um, and so there is another option that you can use without having to trigger anything. Okay. And that's what I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to go back into this module and then I'm going to go to this description and then I'm actually going to go here and copy it. So I'm doing Control C on my keyboard. I know it doesn't show up here, but I'm just copying that. Then I'm going to pull up a note here and I'm going to paste it here. So now we have this pasted here. And you'll notice when I paste it, you get these squiggly brackets. So that's really what's happening here. That's the notation in Fusion for the referencing a variable. And so really easy what we can do is you'll notice, so this is 3 dot new state dot demo nodes, right? Um, update, so that 3 is what's referencing this module. So if I come in here and I change that to a 4 now, that will mean now we're referencing module 4 instead of module 3. Now I'm going to copy that, delete this, and paste that in here. And then if you notice, if I hover over this, that pulsing we see on module 4 indicates clearly that, hey, this is referencing module 4. Now, obviously, if we put in, as an example, let's pull this back up. Let's say demo notes 2, right? This field doesn't exist. If I put this in here, it will still show that it's referencing the module. So you do need to be careful. Um, that's why I always recommend copying it directly. And so if I just cancel this, um, copying it directly from here, that way you know that this is all the correct way it should be written, the way Fusion recognizes it, and then paste it and just change the module's referencing. Another if you don't have a note pulled up, I mean, it's pretty easy to pull up a note, but sometimes if I'm doing it fast, I'll just pull up a new tab and I'll just paste it in here, make that change. But yeah, so we'll go here, paste that, and say, okay, now it's referencing the right module there, and let's save it. That goes away. Let's save the scenario, and now let's run it. Let's make sure that actually worked. So let's run this, and then let's go over here, and this is the task. Just to show you, this is blank. So let's go in here, and let's change this to complete. And now let's go over to Fusion, give that just a sec so it can run. Yeah, there we go. So it just ran and we got no errors. And so let's go look here. So this is now current. Um, and then if I go to project details, that has been updated to that example note. Um, so yeah, and if I go back into Fusion, now if I go in here, you'll actually notice that it's filled in that same, now it's not that kind of blank white background. We have that full filled in. And if we were to open it here, now that we've ran it, we have that here. So let's, again, just to kind of reiterate what's going on here, if I were to now just map that as you normally would, copy that, let's delete this, and I paste it, it's the exact same notation there. And that's because this is what is happening. So if I just deleted this, you'll notice if I were to put it in here, and then if I just add, then it makes it the variable. And so technically that's how you could go in and you can add variables manually. This isn't going to be this isn't going to be this variable because it's not referencing new state, but just to kind of show you what's going on. If I did that, it comes across in Fusion as a variable. Again, this specific one isn't a real true variable because it's not referencing a module, it's not referencing anything. I just wanted to show you that. So, anyways, wanted to take this time to again highlight what's happening, make sure everyone's aware of what's coming with the update to the um, modules, and then show you how to update that event subscription, which is pretty straightforward. If know how to create the V1, you know how to create the V2. But really the trick comes in making sure everything is mapped correctly. Because the other thing you'll notice is, so typically if you may know this, in the past, if you were creating a new V1 webhook, it would actually show up here like this does. So this was another webhook I had created in this scenario before, and I can still reference it. But if you remember, the name of this one is that YouTube demo. Because it's a V2, it doesn't show up here. So you can't, so previously, like for example, I could just create the webhook here, update it here to whatever the new one was. I then wouldn't have to remap anything because the module number would stay the same, just the actual payload would be different. Um, in this case, it's a completely new module. There's no way to kind of just update this specific module. You have to create a new one. In the case of these other modules, like this update a record, you can just click on this green button and hit upgrade, and then it will go in and automatically upgrade it. So in that case, you do not need to create a new module. You just can really easily click that update or upgrade button and it'll do it for you. That being said, I would say just be cautious. I would say 90% of the time that works great and there's no issues. Though I have seen some instances where depending on the module, it doesn't upgrade everything exactly correct. Especially I would say note if you have in that module where you're either searching for or updating multiple custom forms. Um, just I would always look at that. The When you upgrade it, make sure everything's mapped correctly. Um, and then again, definitely run some tests to ensure it's working properly and you didn't accidentally break anything. Another thing I should have mentioned in coming into this that I end up doing a lot of times is before I make any changes, I'll go and I'll save. So in this case, I didn't do it. I should have done it. But I would go in, save the changes, and then I would actually go in here and I would rename it. So I would come in here and I say this is V1. I save it. Again, I know this is technically V2. I've already updated it, but assume I hadn't updated anything yet. I would do that as the very first thing, save it, rename that version as V1 in the save previous versions. Then I would make all my changes, and then I would let's just do that, and I'll come back here. And then I would make all the changes, save it again. I'll then call that new one V2. So that way, I just had a good clean record of, when I made the update, as well as being able to, if I needed to revert back to V2, or sorry, to V1. But I will say with that, if you revert back to V1 here, that does not change um the watch event itself. It won't recreate a like previous watch event or event subscription, and it won't automatically like re-sync everything with this. So it will make changes to like the other modules. Let's just see as an example. If I did this one. Yeah. So this, for example, you see this change back to the V1. Then if I went and I said, okay, go back to V2, that updates it. But if I go back, maybe try this one. Um, so in this case, since I haven't, it's still an active webhook, it's fine. But let's say you did this a while ago, and now this webhook has like been deleted, or it's been like turned off because of an activity. It wouldn't just reverting back to the previous version would not recreate that webhook, would not turn it back on or do anything like that. So it's just something to be aware of. So yeah, anyways, hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you found that interesting and useful, especially again, I've personally used this trick where I've had, especially a lot more complex scenario than this, and needing to update and remap things and not wanting to necessarily like run multiple things, have to go in, find where I need to run it, what task or what project or whatever issue needs to be created or updated, make sure it has all the right fields. That can, be a lot of work. And whereas in some instances, this is a lot easier to just copy, change the reference module, paste it back in, and just know as long as you're copying it exactly how it was, you should be fine. Again, assuming you're bringing in the same data, right? Which you should be because you have the same webhook. So if that made sense, hopefully that helped. Feel free to drop any questions in the comments. I love all the questions. And so, yeah, anything you'd like to know or like me to expand on, definitely let me know. Definitely stay tuned for more videos that will be coming soon, talking more about Fusion and Workfront. And AI has some AI videos coming, integrating, Fusion with AI and how that looks. So stay tuned for all that, and I will catch you guys on the next video.